They called us primitive. The Galactic Accord, in their golden robes and floating cities, called us a developing species. A polite insult that really meant backward, weak, and disposable. We weren't even given a seat at their grand table, just a spot in the audience where we could clap and nod like good pets. I was there the first time they laughed at us. Not figuratively, literally laughed. It was during a weapons demonstration at the Accord's annual security summit. We were allowed 5 minutes to present Earth's latest defense system. 5 minutes, like we were some sideshow act. The others, Thracians with their plasma crescents, the Illith with bio-coded war beasts, had entire hours, holograms, simulations, full immersive showcases. We got a countdown clock. I remember standing there beside General Dorn, the kind of man who'd buried his emotions somewhere in the sands of a battlefield long ago. He wore his uniform like a second skin. Tight, precise, every medal earned in blood. I was just a translator then, not even supposed to be in the war room. But the general wanted someone who could interpret more than just words. Someone who could read the sneers, the contempt behind those alien eyes. When we unveiled the Vanguard Protocol, a sleek black satellite system hidden just behind Earth's moon, the chamber filled with snickering. One of the Thracian delegates even asked if it was a weather balloon. Another wondered aloud if the humans had finally discovered nuclear fusion, like it was some ancient joke. The Illithian ambassador, a snake-thin creature with translucent skin, clapped mockingly. General Dorn didn't react. He didn't need to. He just tapped his datapad and said, "Watch." And everything changed. One by one, orbital feed screens lit up. Not a simulation, not a model, real-time footage. The Vanguard array activated, and for the first time, the galaxy saw what humans had really been building. Not just a defense system, but a planetary-scale kill grid. Lasers that bent through magnetospheres, railguns with kinetic rounds the size of tanks, nanoclouds that disassembled anything organic or synthetic in under a minute. It wasn't just the weapons, it was the precision, the speed, the cold, brutal efficiency. In under 30 seconds, the Vanguard array ran a mock purge of Earth's orbit, simulating the destruction of over 700 enemy crafts, each marked with alien symbols for clarity, not just hypothetical targets, real warships mimicked in detail from publicly known fleet specs. And then we dropped the real bomb. We'd tested Vanguard, not in simulations, in live combat. Dorn revealed footage from 2 weeks earlier, footage that had been scrubbed from every Accord channel. A Thracian Black Ops fleet had violated Earth's space, quietly testing our defenses. The Accord had denied any knowledge of it, calling it rogue elements. But the feed was undeniable. 27 enemy cruisers had entered our atmosphere. None made it past the exosphere. They were erased, one after another, with such speed and ferocity that only one transmission was ever sent. A single scream before static. And suddenly no one was laughing. The room fell so silent I could hear my own breath. The same Illithian ambassador who had clapped before now recoiled, his eyes darting to the exits. The Thracian delegate's mouth hung open. Even the mechanical races, who weren't supposed to feel fear, began recalculating probabilities out loud. Estimated threat rating? Re-evaluating. Human military capacity, non-conventional, high anomaly risk, re-evaluating. And still, General Dorn stood still. "This isn't a threat," he said. "This is a warning." That was the first time I saw what power really looked like, not just in guns and satellites, but in silence, in the absence of arrogance. We didn't need to scream. We didn't need to beg. We showed them the blade, and let them imagine its use. And from that day forward, no one laughed at Earth again. The silence that followed our presentation was deafening. Not because the room was void of noise, but because the usual chatter, the snide commentary, the pompous commentary of races who'd never known real war had disappeared. And in that vacuum of arrogance, the Accord saw something it hadn't expected. Fear. But fear wasn't enough. Because fear fades. It gets questioned, rationalized, turned into myths and misunderstandings. So General Dorn made sure they'd never forget. He uploaded the Vanguard's classified documentation to the Accord's secured systems, details they never expected us to possess. Their first reaction: accusation. "This is stolen technology," barked the Thorokian War Minister, his voice trembling beneath his metallic jaw plates. "This level of coordination isn't possible for your species. Your kind only just achieved interstellar propulsion." Dorn met the accusation with an unblinking stare. "You assume we're behind because we didn't show our hand. You're wrong. We were watching, quietly, preparing. While you laughed at our rockets, we perfected our satellites. While you sent spies, we mapped your fleets. The worst part for them? It was true. Humans never stopped at convention. We're not the kind to follow galactic norms. We never cared for the Accord's military rankings or their bureaucratic warfare. We didn't build ships for style. We built to kill. Our weapons weren't meant for show. They were created for one purpose: to win. But winning meant understanding more than just the battlefield. It meant knowing the enemy before the first shot, and humans. We were good at watching. Better than anyone expected. I remember what happened next because it changed everything." Dorn turned to me and said, "Initiate Protocol V2. I hesitated, unsure if he was serious. He looked at me with those cold steel eyes. Now, I typed the command into my tablet. The screens across the Accord chamber flickered, and then came the true unveiling: Earth's military dossiers on every species seated in that room. It wasn't just speculative intelligence. It was precise, ruthless analysis. Weak points in their armor systems, structural flaws in flagship designs, psychological vulnerabilities in command hierarchies. We'd broken their codes, read their logs, listened to their encrypted calls for years without their knowledge. Every power in the room was stripped bare in front of one another. Panic spread fast. The Yultrax, usually stoic and composed, started speaking over each other in rapid bursts. The Vithari, hive-mind strategists known for calm coordination, fractured into confused shouting. The Accord's guards, those smug golden-armored sentinels, grabbed their weapons in reflex, unsure of where the threat was even coming from. But we weren't done. General Dorn stepped forward and uttered one word: demonstration. It took a second for the chamber's AI system to respond. The floor beneath us rumbled. A hologram emerged, not just a map, but a tactical simulation of an active battlefield. Planet Atora 6, a mining colony jointly owned by 4 Accord nations. A planet we had no official connection to. But the Vanguard did. The simulation showed what happened 3 days earlier. Atora 6 had been attacked by a pirate coalition, a mix of former Accord mercenaries gone rogue. The Council had delayed response. Too far, too expensive, not worth the risk. So Earth intervened, without warning, without permission. In under 11 minutes, the Vanguard's command center, orbiting quietly in stealth above Atora 6, deployed its tools. Ground troops were incapacitated through sonic pulse. Airships were knocked from the sky with focused EMP strikes. Not a single building on the colony was touched. No civilians harmed. The pirates were dismantled, arrested, and delivered, alive, to their homeworlds with a simple message: Earth doesn't tolerate disorder. It wasn't just about power anymore. It was about control, about showing the galaxy that humanity was capable of projecting force anywhere, anytime, with surgical precision. No warning, no speeches, just results. The reaction was exactly what Dorn wanted. The Vithari hive mind disconnected its diplomatic node and requested a temporary halt in all off-Earth operations. The Tharokians called for an emergency vote to reclassify humans from emerging species to strategic threat. And the Elythian ambassador? He didn't even wait for the meeting to end. He left mid-session, his guards flanking him like prey caught in open space. But it was the Chancellor of the Accord, a fragile-looking being whose species lived longer than most suns, who finally broke the silence. "What is it you want, General Dorn?" he asked. "A seat at the table? Resources? Control?" Dorn's reply was as cold as his stare. "We want respect, and we've earned it. No more lectures, no more restrictions. You don't get to decide what's advanced or who gets access to what. Earth will no longer be your afterthought." It was bold, it was risky, but it worked. The Council had no choice. By the next dawn cycle, humans were granted full membership in the Accord. Not just a symbolic gesture. We were given a voice in the Military Council, access to fleet intelligence, and the right to deploy force under Article 17, defensive overreach. That meant we could intervene in any situation we deemed a threat, even if the rest of the galaxy disagreed. But power has a price, because when you show your hand, even a strong one, you paint a target on your back. And we'd just screamed to the stars that Earth wasn't a child anymore. It was a weapon. 2 days after the summit, I was walking with Dorn through the underground command base in Alaska, one of the coldest, most isolated places we still kept as a military stronghold. I asked him if we'd made the right move. He didn't answer immediately. We stopped by a glass panel overlooking the Vanguard's ground uplink station, a massive tower blinking with red lights against the snowy horizon. "Power doesn't mean safety," he said finally. "It just changes the type of enemies you attract." He was right. Within the week, unmarked ships were spotted near Jupiter's orbit. Communications from unknown origin began probing Earth's network channels. A probe crashed into the Sahara Desert, its technology untraceable, and satellites started failing, silently, mysteriously. Someone was testing us, or worse, preparing. But Dorn wasn't worried. He wanted them to come. Because Earth had more than just satellites and data. We had soldiers, the kind that didn't make speeches, men who'd bled in real wars, not simulations, who trained in blizzards and deserts, who learned how to kill with silence and patience. And me? I was just the guy who used to translate alien jokes. Now I translated threats. Every signal, every whisper across the stars came to my terminal. And what I saw next made my stomach turn. Because there was one species not at the summit, one no one talked about anymore, a ghost race that the Accord quietly labeled extinct over a century ago. The Xerak. The reason? Classified. But now their signals were back. Faint, broken, but familiar. And one message came through, clear as day. In English, not their tongue. Humanity has awakened. The fire returns. Phase 1 begins. I showed it to Dorn that same night. He read it once. Then again. And for the first time since the summit, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Not fear exactly, but tension, like a hunter sensing he's no longer alone in the forest. "Looks like they were watching us too," he said. I asked what we should do. He answered with that same brutal calm. "We prepare for war." The first attack didn't come as a fleet. It came as silence. One by one, Earth's outer relays, long-range satellite buoys stationed in the void between star systems, stopped transmitting. No damage, no distress calls. Just blank. Gone, like light switched off in the dark. Most species in the Accord wouldn't have noticed, or if they did, they'd chalk it up to technical failures or rogue ion storms. But we weren't most species. We were humans, and humans, if nothing else, pay attention to patterns. I sat in the signal monitoring room of the Alaskan base when we lost the 6th relay. My screen flashed red, then black. One of the younger techs muttered something about faulty calibration. But I knew better. This wasn't malfunction. It was intentional. Each relay lost was part of a web, an early warning system designed to detect deep space incursions. Whoever was behind it wasn't just probing, they were erasing our eyes. General Dorn entered the room without a word. He didn't need to say anything. We all straightened, like a current of cold air swept through our veins. He stood behind me, staring at the monitor. 3 systems blind. 28% coverage gone, I said quietly. He nodded. Confirm timeline. I hesitated. The pattern suggests coordinated shutoffs every 13.2 hours. If it continues, we'll lose the outer ring in 3 days. Inner defenses compromised within the week. The room went still. Dorn turned and left. No speech, no orders. Just a single nod toward me. Follow. We took the elevator to the Black Room, a classified chamber beneath the command base, encased in layered steel, electromagnetic shielding, and dead zone AI null zones. The kind of place no signal enters or leaves without Dorn's biometric approval. Inside, 7 men were already waiting. No ranks, no introductions. Just men you didn't want to meet in a dark alley. Veterans, assassins, spooks. The kind of soldiers Earth denied existed, because their work never showed up on any report. Dorn didn't sit. He never did. They're coming, he said, and they're not just coming for Earth. They want to wipe the memory of us from the stars. He laid a file on the table. Physical paper, thick and yellow with classified markings. Gerak, he said, tapping it. Extinct, according to the Accord. But we've always known better. They went underground, hid after the Hive purge, started rebuilding in the blackest corners of the void. One of the men, a sharp-eyed sniper named Tren, spoke for the first time. Why now? Because we showed our hand, Dorn said. Because we reminded them of what they buried a century ago. Humanity was part of that war. We weren't in space back then, not officially. But our early probes recorded fragments, footage that should have been impossible, and someone on the Gerak side remembers. He passed out images, not digital, hard prints, photos taken from old probes, cleaned up through advanced reconstruction, massive structures, floating cities shaped like twisted bone and metal, ships black as void, lined with teeth instead of hulls, and a symbol, like a claw circling a dying star. One of the agents muttered, "Death cult?" Dorn nodded. Worse. They don't want domination. They want silence. A galaxy where nothing breathes unless it obeys. The Accord hid it, covered up the Hive War to protect stability, but now they've gone silent. No support, no backup. We're on our own, I said. Dorn looked at me, eyes like cold iron. Number we're ahead. He tapped a hidden console on the table. A new hologram appeared. Earth's real fleet. Not the ceremonial ships we showed the Accord, not the patrol cruisers circling Mars or Venus, but the Black Arcs, the silent warships buried beneath the lunar surface. The ghost fleet we built in secret, funded off the books, tested in the deep dark. 72 ships. No windows, no names. Just code numbers and armaments that made nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. Plasma coils, quantum detonators, disassembler drones. Built for one purpose: total denial of enemy existence. We launch in 72 hours, Dorn said. Phase 1, locate the source of the relay blackout. Phase 2, test enemy response. Phase 3. He paused. If necessary, execute protocol extinction. That silenced the room. Protocol extinction wasn't a bluff. It was a dead man's order. If an enemy showed signs of total war, Earth would retaliate with zero mercy. Not just military targets, but infrastructure, command centers, even biospheres. We'd never had to use it, until now. I was assigned to Ghost 17, call sign Severance, a heavy assault corvette with 2 Aegis coils and a quantum cloak generator. The crew was only 12, each one a veteran. No rookies, no idealists, just killers who knew why we were there. The launch from Luna Base was silent. No fanfare, no broadcasts. We slipped into the void like shadows, spreading across the outer system like hunters in the woods. 2 days in, we found the first trace. A wreck, not ours, not Accord. It floated above the gas dwarf in the Helix sector. Twisted metal, burned bodies still floating in vacuum, but no signs of impact, no scorch marks. Whatever hit them did it with invisible claws. Severance scanned the wreck. The AI whispered possible IDs. Thorokian scout ship. Possibly a defector or spy vessel. They'd been wiped clean, no data core, no communications. But one thing was left behind, scratched into the ship's hull, barely visible. That same symbol, the claw and dying star. We forwarded the image to Earth. No reply. Communications were jammed for 3.2 hours. Not by accident. We weren't alone in the dark. Day 5. We entered the Titan Abyss, an old mining zone near the Oort line, abandoned decades ago due to seismic instability. Bullshit. What we found there made blood run cold. 3 Ghost Fleet ships, missing for years, listed as lost to accidents, were floating in perfect formation. But dead. No signals. No power. Just hollow husks, like someone had dissected them. Our sensors picked up biosignatures, not human. Tren, our sniper, and Valen, the engineer, suited up for recon. They boarded the nearest derelict, Ghost 09, Calamity. I stayed on the comms, fingers trembling as I patched into their helmet feeds. It was dark. No lights, just the sound of their breathing, then static. Then, whispers. Not in any language, just sounds, inside their helmets, coming through the sealed comms. Tren screamed first, then silence. Valen's feed stayed open for 6 more seconds. Long enough for us to see the shadow. Tall, bipedal. Wrong. We pulled back. Dorn's voice came through a direct, encrypted line. "You've seen enough. Prepare strike." We didn't argue. Severance locked coordinates. We launched 2 singularity torpedoes into the abyss, not to destroy the ships, but to bury them in a pocket of collapsed space-time, a grave no one could reach. And still, it didn't feel like enough. Back on Earth, alerts were lighting up. Civilian sensors were picking up strange pulses in the atmosphere, tiny fluctuations in gravity, like something massive had passed by just out of sight. Our skies were being watched. The Xerac weren't launching an invasion. They were playing with us, measuring our patience, testing how far we'd go before we snapped. And Dorn? He snapped first. He initiated protocol ignition. 4 Ghost Arcs dropped from the edge of the solar system and entered interstellar phase shift. One-way missions. No return. Their orders? Locate Xerac hives, deliver payloads, and burn everything. I didn't know whether to feel proud or terrified, because when humans go to war, we don't play fair. We don't follow rules. We break them, burn them, and in the ashes, we build victory. But for the first time in my life, I wondered, what if we weren't the deadliest things out here? What if the Xerac weren't afraid? What if they were waiting? We thought we understood war. We thought the Xerac were just another enemy with ships, weapons, and a strategy we could eventually learn to counter. But on day 9 of the operation, that illusion died. It started with Ghost 42, A communication spike hit us from their sector near the Kepler fracture, a deep space anomaly that absorbed light and scrambled sensors. 1 second they were patrolling, the next they were screaming. I monitored the feed from Severance's data deck, eyes locked on the distortion-filled video. Through static and interference, I could make out flashing lights, crew shouting in panic, then something wrong. Something alive. It didn't move like a creature or a machine. It flickered, stuttered in and out of vision, like it wasn't bound by the same physics we lived in. One moment it was outside the hull, the next it was inside. The feed ended with a sharp frequency burst that cracked every earpiece on the deck. We sent the drones. What they returned was worse than silence. Ghost 42 was there, but changed. Not destroyed. Changed. Its hull now bore Zerak markings etched into the metal like scars. Strange black growths spread along the spine of the ship like veins, pulsing faintly with a reddish light. Human technology, twisted, corrupted. Something had overwritten its very design. And then the power signature changed. It was no longer dead. Ghost 42 turned toward our observation drone and opened fire. Not with standard weapons. It launched a ripple of gravitational distortion that tore our recon vessel into atoms. We watched the birth of something new. The Zerak weren't just fighting us, they were assimilating us. Dorn's emergency comm came through seconds later. All units, code Obsidian. Ghost 42 is hostile. All reanimated vessels are to be considered compromised. No rescue, no salvage, immediate annihilation authorization. The word reanimated stuck in my head like a splinter. The implications were brutal. Our dead could become their tools, our ships, our men, twisted into weapons against us. It wasn't just war anymore. It was infection. Severance received new orders. Rendezvous with Ghost 05 and 33 for a forward assault sweep on the Vega Drift Corridor. Intel suggested a high-density Zerak signal had spiked from that region. 3 ships, 37 soldiers. Facing an enemy we couldn't see, understand, or even recognize until it was too late. We reached the coordinates within hours, our quantum engines leaving a ripple of folded space behind. Ghost 05, call sign Ashfall, was already in orbit. Ghost 33 to Tempest arrived shortly after. The commanding officer of Ashfall, Captain Bryn, was a stone-jawed man with hands that looked carved from granite. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Signals are dirty here," he said. "Something's bending space. Feels like gravity, but it's not. You ever feel watched in a dream? It's like that. Eyes everywhere." Dorn's voice came through our secure line. "Confirm the anomaly. Do not engage unless fired upon. But if it moves like Zerak, burn it." We began the sweep. Sensors showed us nothing. No movement, no heat, no anomalies beyond a slight electromagnetic irregularity that was chalked up to the drift's natural instability. Then the stars disappeared. Literally. Our forward viewing ports went dark. Not black, empty, like the universe had been erased ahead of us. Tempest's pilot, a nervous young man named Coulter, screamed over the comms, "We lost the field! I can't see! What the hell is that?" Then came the hum. Low, subsonic. It didn't come through the speakers. It vibrated through the hull. Every crew member on Severance froze. It wasn't fear. It was paralysis, like something had reached into our nervous systems and pressed pause. I forced my hand to move, finger trembling over the emergency override. I slammed the neural stim button, sending a jolt through the ship's life support systems. Everyone gasped, blinking back into consciousness. Outside, the void shifted, and something moved. It wasn't a ship. It was too massive, too organic. It looked like a city, alive and breathing, floating silently across the drift. Buildings, number growths, tendrils stretching out into space, connected by strands of light like neuron webs. In its center pulsed a single red orb the size of a moon. Ashfall fired first. A salvo of torpedoes screamed across the drift and vanished before impact. Not intercepted, not destroyed, just gone. Tempest followed suit with its disassembler drones. Same result. That's when the orb opened. It wasn't a weapon. It was an eye. And it saw us. The hum returned. Louder now. A scream hidden inside the sound. Crew members across all 3 ships began to collapse, bleeding from their ears. One engineer on Ashfall reportedly clawed his own eyes out before the medical team restrained him. We had to act. Captain Bryn issued the order. Full retreat. Dorn responded with an override. Negative. That structure is a hive core. Confirm coordinates. Prepare for Excalibur strike. Excalibur was our last card. A planet-buster payload developed in Earth's deepest black projects. No explosion, no radiation, just implosion. A self-consuming gravity knot that erased matter itself. It had only been tested once, on an uninhabited moon. What it left behind wasn't a crater. It was a scar in reality. We launched the Excalibur. The payload locked onto the core and fired. It took 7.3 seconds to reach the target. The orb blinked, then disappeared. Gone. No explosion. No feedback. Just nothing. We stared. Waited. Hoped. Then our ships began to drift backwards. Not from movement, but because space itself was pulling in. The Excalibur had activated. The orb hadn't dodged. It had accepted the payload. It wanted it. It was feeding. I watched in disbelief as the stars twisted. Our ship groaned under the strain. The pull grew stronger. Bryn screamed over the comms. "Shut it down! It's amplifying!" But you don't shut down an Excalibur. You die with it, unless you run faster than reality collapses. Dorn's voice was sharp and cold. Phase shift, now abandon sector. We didn't argue. Severance, Ashfall, and Tempest entered quantum slip simultaneously. Behind us, the drift corridor folded into a singularity, then vanished, like it had never existed. We escaped, but the message was clear. The Jerak didn't just survive our strongest weapon. They used it. Back at Earth Command, the fallout hit fast. The Accord demanded an explanation for the quantum shockwave that rattled systems across 4 sectors. Dorn refused to comment. The Chancellor of the Accord sent a direct order for ceasefire. We ignored it. Humanity had crossed the threshold. There was no going back. Every nation on Earth began full military mobilization. The skies filled with orbital factories producing new warships. Cities went dark as power was rerouted to spaceports. For the first time since the summit, Earth felt united, not by peace, but by survival. And still, no word from the Jerak, until the feeds flickered again. The same symbol appeared, claw and dying star, this time not etched into metal. It was projected across the moons of Saturn, burned into their surface with precision no species should possess. A message followed, one phrase repeated in every language. Your war has begun. Your scream is beautiful. I read those words and felt the chill sink deep. Because this wasn't a war to them. It was art. They studied pain like we studied mathematics. That was the conclusion of the decrypted Zerak signal Earth Command intercepted just days after the Vega drift implosion. It wasn't a message meant for us. It was internal, an echo broadcasted between their hive structures. But once we cracked their spectral coding, the meaning was clear. They weren't interested in resources or territory. They were measuring reactions, Human reactions, fear, despair, resistance, and most disturbing of all, adaptation. We'd fought back harder and faster than any of their previous targets. They liked that. No, they needed that. Like a sculptor needs sharp stone, or a surgeon needs complex tissue. That's when we realized something chilling. This wasn't a war, it was a harvest. General Dorn's face had changed. Still cold, still unreadable. But there was something different now. Something in his posture, less rigid, more coiled, as if the weight of understanding had finally settled in his bones. He gathered his top teams in what we called the Crucible Room. Underground, shielded, no signals, just human minds and their will to survive. I sat closest to the board, still technically the interpreter, but by now everyone knew my role had evolved. I wasn't translating words anymore. I was reading their culture, piecing together the horror. Dorn opened with a question. What do the Xerac want? No one answered. Not at first. Then Tren, the sniper from Ghost 17, broke the silence. Not territory, not conquest. They want identity. I glanced at him, surprised. What do you mean? They mimic, corrupt. They reanimate our tech, our ships, even our dead, he said. But not just to use them. They study us through them. It's how they learn, how they grow. Valen, our recovered engineer, still trembling from the Vega drift mission, chimed in. It's like they don't build anything of their own. They repurpose, but with purpose. They take what you fear most and make it permanent. Dorn nodded. They consume meaning. Pain is their blueprint. Our resistance makes us a masterpiece. He pointed to the holographic projection now floating above the table. A model of Earth, but twisted, marked with red veins, fractal etchings, and Xerac structure nodes planted across the continents. A simulation, not a plan. They'd already envisioned the world as theirs. Project Karen, Dorn said grimly. A captured data fragment from the Vega collapse. A vision of what Earth will become after full integration. The air thickened. Not destruction, not slavery, but transformation. Every forest turned into breathing fungus. Every city, a pulsing hive node. Every body, fuel. And then he showed us something worse. A face. Mine. Projected from Xerac files, reconstructed using fragments of our intercepted communications. My face, twisted, skin pulled into geometric patterns, eyes pitch black, voice layered in static. It spoke only 3 words. We remember you. I stared in horror. They're building a psychological profile, Dorn said. Not of our species, of individuals, of us. They're targeting you, Tren muttered. Why? I swallowed. Because I've been listening, and they know it. The realization was a gut punch. Every word I had translated, every pattern I'd interpreted, they weren't just one way. The Xerac were listening back, learning me, shaping a response through my perception. They were adapting to the translator. That's when the Crucible Room changed focus, from war planning to containment. Dorn gave orders to isolate my comms. No more direct feeds. Everything I read from Xerac data was now through analog mediums. Printouts, handwriting, even drawings. Technology could be corrupted. My mind couldn't. At least, that's what they hoped. But the dreams began anyway. Not nightmares. Worse. Memories that weren't mine. I saw a planet covered in obsidian towers, Xerac homeworld, maybe. I felt the echo of millions of voices, whispering from under the crust. I tasted the cold bitterness of vacuum, as if I had no lungs to breathe. And always, always the phrase, "We remember you." Then came the defector. A ship appeared at the edge of our solar system, small, crippled. sending a weak distress signal using an Accord frequency last used during the Hive War, almost 100 years old. We scrambled 2 ghost ships for intercept. What they brought back stunned Earth Command. It was Zarak, but not humanoid in shape. Thin, pale, translucent skin like veined glass, half-mechanical spine, eyes black but flickering, like something was dying inside them. It wore what might once have been a uniform, now charred and melted into its flesh. It spoke English, and it asked for me. I entered the containment chamber under heavy guard. Dorn watched through reinforced glass. The being, if you could still call it that, sat strapped to a cold steel chair, limbs bound by magnetic restraints. "Do you know me?" I asked, my voice lower than I expected. It nodded slowly. "You hear them," it said, voice distorted like a half-tuned radio. "You see the edge." "Who are you?" I demanded. Its head tilted. "I was like you once. Translator, observer, analyst, chosen." "By the Zarak?" "By curiosity. That is their seed. They do not conquer. They invade perception. They plant themselves in the understanding of a species." "What do they want with Earth?" Its gaze darkened. "To remember what you forgot." I froze. "We've never met them before. Humanity had no contact with—" "You did. Before you knew stars. Before you named time. They passed through your world once, and something resisted. Something primal. You burned them. And they never forgot." My chest tightened. A prehistoric encounter? A psychic imprint? Something deep in our evolutionary past? "They feed on narrative," it continued. "On myth, on legend. You are not a species to them. You are a story. And stories that resist are precious." Dorn's voice crackled through my earpiece. "We're done here." But the defector wasn't. "You've awakened the final shard," it whispered, "the one that dreams beneath Mars." "What?" Static cut the feed. Guards moved in. The being screamed once, high, metallic, and then it imploded. Not exploded. Imploded, crushed into itself with a sound like torn silk. What remained was a black stain on the floor. No DNA. No matter. Just absence. The Zarak had severed the connection and left a message. We scanned Mars for anomalies. Nothing showed. Not on the surface. Not in the crust. Until we went deeper. Old mining tunnels from early colonization efforts, abandoned due to unstable magnetic fields, a zone we hadn't entered in decades. We sent a drone. It lasted 37 seconds. What it recorded changed everything. A structure, not natural, buried deep, miles wide, made of the same twisted metal and bone composite we'd seen on Zarak hives, and at its core, a chamber, with a throne. Empty. Waiting. Dorn ordered immediate deployment of our top ground units. No drones, no remotes. Human eyes. Human decisions. I was assigned to observe from orbit. No contact, no interference. But in my gut, I knew the Zarak wanted me there. Every sign pointed inward, downward, toward the throne, and toward whatever memory we had left behind. Because the past wasn't dead. It had just been waiting. The Mars expedition wasn't authorized by the Accord. Dorn made that decision in silence. He didn't ask for permission, and he sure as hell didn't notify their so-called Oversight Council. Earth wasn't playing politics anymore. We were past that. He knew if they found out what was buried beneath the surface, they'd try to bury it again, along with everyone who saw it. The mission was codenamed Red Wake. 3 ghost units were selected, 05, 17, and 39. They weren't just combat squads. They were specialists in deep environment warfare, electromagnetic suppression, and psychological resistance. Mars wasn't a battlefield, it was a tomb, and whatever was waiting inside didn't want to be understood. I wasn't supposed to go. I begged Dorn. "This thing knows me," I said. "It's been talking to me since Vega. I saw my face in their signal. They built a version of me. You want to walk in blind or with someone who's already halfway infected?" He didn't argue. He just looked me in the eye and said, "If you come back different, I'll kill you myself." Deal. We dropped just past the Noctis region into a fissure long thought to be a collapsed lava tube. That was a lie. The structure beneath wasn't geological. The drone's brief scan had caught glimpses of architecture. Symmetrical, intentional, alien. It was darker than anything I'd ever seen. Not the absence of light, but something worse. The absence of reflection. Even our flashlights seemed to be swallowed whole. Tren took point, his rail rifle humming softly in the low-pressure atmosphere. Valen managed the sensory feeds, bouncing encrypted telemetry back to our orbiting recon ship. We descended in silence, the only sounds our own breath and the slow crunch of boots against the reddish-black dust. We reached the chamber after 3 hours of vertical drop and lateral crawling through carved stone that looked grown. The throne room was real. Massive, circular. Its walls were ribbed with pulsating veins of dark matter, a biological metal hybrid unknown to our databases. In the center sat the throne. Empty. Except it wasn't. I felt it before I saw it. A pull. Not physical. Something conceptual, like my identity was being tugged toward the seat. I stepped forward. Tren tried to stop me. I didn't listen. The moment I touched the throne, everything shattered. Not my body, my time. I was no longer in the chamber. I was somewhere ancient. The sky was red. The stars were wrong. I was on Earth, but not our Earth. I saw people, naked, savage, howling at the moon, and then I saw them, the Zerak, descending not from ships but from the sky itself, like a wound in the atmosphere bleeding shadows. They came not as conquerors but as collectors. They harvested not flesh but memory, pulling entire cultures into silence. I watched a man, our ancestor, stand against them, alone, a crude spear in hand. He didn't speak. He screamed. And in that scream, something shattered in the Jerek swarm. One fell, then another. The scream wasn't sonic. It was will. Pure, unfiltered defiance. It broke them. They fled. Earth was left untouched, but not unwatched. That scream, the memory of resistance, it was burned into the psychic fabric of our species. Passed down, inherited, remembered. I came back gasping, face soaked with sweat, knees weak. Valen helped me sit. Tren kept his rifle pointed at the throne like it might grow arms. "What the hell happened?" he asked. "They didn't forget us," I whispered, "because we were the only ones who ever made them bleed." Dorn's voice cracked through the comms. "Confirm intel." I stared at the throne. "This isn't just a monument," I said. "It's a mirror. It shows us what they fear, what they need, and they need us to remember who we were." Valen frowned. "Why?" "Because they're scared, not of our weapons, of our will. They don't understand it. They never did. They think if they can study it, replicate it, they can control it." "And if they can't," Tren asked, "then they'll erase us completely." The throne began to vibrate, a low hum, rising. We stepped back, but the chamber didn't shake. Reality did. Walls flickered, lights bent, sounds bled into our heads, and then it arrived, not in body, In thought, a projection, massive, floating, a Jirac construct in the form of me, or at least the version they'd built. Eyes like black holes, skin like shattered mirrors, voice like mine, but twisted. You are the fracture, it said. You are the echo we cannot shape. The crew raised weapons. I didn't. You're scared, I said quietly. It didn't deny it. You remember the scream, I continued. The one that broke your swarm. You should not exist, it replied. The scream was meant to fade, but you carried it, hidden, in silence, in war, in grief. My hands clenched. That was it. They didn't understand why we fought. They thought it was for victory. But it never was. It was for grief. Loss. Rage. Pain. That was our strength. The scream came not from pride, but from heartbreak. You want to replicate us? I asked. Try this. And I screamed. Not a sound, a thought, a burst of every death I'd witnessed, every body I'd buried, every ship I'd seen fall, every face I'd lost. I threw it at the projection. The chamber shook. The walls cracked. The throne split in two. And the construct, my shadow, collapsed. Tren shouted, "We've got movement! Full retreat!" We ran. Behind us, the chamber began to collapse, not from explosives, but from memory overload. The throne had been a psychic relay. It couldn't handle raw, unfiltered human grief. We escaped through the tunnels just before they sealed. The upper layers caved in. The entire structure folded into itself. The hive beneath Mars was gone. But its echo? Still inside me. Back on Earth, I was placed in decontamination, psychological quarantine. Dorn personally oversaw every test. I passed them all. Barely. But something inside had changed. Not infected. Enlightened. I understood now. The Jirac didn't want our planet, or our bodies. They wanted our scream. They wanted to tame it. Because in that scream, our grief, our rage, our refusal to break, was the only thing that had ever threatened their control. Dorn didn't wait. He mobilized the Valkyrie protocol. The Ghost Fleet doubled. New weapons were authorized, ones once considered too unstable. AI hybrids, emotional resonance bombs, mind-hacking sonic artillery. No more holding back. No more waiting. Earth was ready to become the monster they feared. Because sometimes, to defeat the darkness, you have to become something darker. The war we were fighting had changed. It wasn't about fleets anymore. Not about guns or technology, or even survival. It was psychological, spiritual, existential. The Jirac weren't just trying to destroy us. They were trying to rewrite us, turn grief into obedience, rage into submission, history into a blank slate. But they'd made one mistake. They gave us time, enough time to remember what made us terrifying, and under Dorn's command, Earth finally decided to stop playing defense. The Valkyrie protocol was never meant for public knowledge. It had been buried deep in black files, too unstable to be tested, too dangerous to be used. A cross-disciplinary nightmare of bioengineering, AI cognition, and psychic feedback. The weapons had no names, just designations. Echelon. 9, a class of orbital artillery that fired memories, broadcasting humanity's worst atrocities in focused beams that shattered enemy coherence. Ether Bloom. Planet-seeding mines that turned terrain into semi-sentient traps, absorbing enemy movement and learning it in real time. Gideon Alpha. A singular flagship constructed from decommissioned nuclear cores, fused with a psychic amplifier stolen from a dead Xerac node. Piloted not by crew, but by grief-trained AIs constructed from scanned human minds who died in battle. It was a funeral machine, and it didn't speak. It screamed. I stood aboard Severance, now upgraded, refitted, and placed on the command wing of Valkyrie's main fleet. Dorn himself was present, unusual. He rarely left Earth's atmosphere. But he knew this final act needed leadership. Human leadership. "Target?" I asked. His reply was calm. "They call it the core womb." That name alone made my stomach twist. "The source?" I asked. "Their origin," he said. "Their final fallback. We've traced the signals. The hive that controls the others. It's not a planet. It's not even a structure." "What is it?" Dorn looked out the viewport. "It's a reflection." The core womb existed at the edge of what we understood, floating in the void between galaxies, hidden in folds of space-time that bent light and thought alike. It wasn't found. It was felt. The deeper we scanned, the less our sensors understood. It looked like Earth, not geographically, emotionally. A dead twin, cracked continents, faded oceans, a black sun that pulsed like a rotten heart, built not from matter, but from memory. The Jerak's final defense wasn't shields. It was us, our worst version. We dropped into the system with 50 ships, 20 Ghost class, 10 Ark class, and the centerpiece, Gideon Alpha. The moment we entered, every ship received the same transmission. Not sound, images of our own history, burning cities, civil wars, genocides, executions, starvation, screams that never stopped. The Zerak didn't attack. They broadcasted, and they were trying to fracture us before we fired a shot. Valen vomited in his suit. Tren tore off his helmet and had to be sedated. Even Dorn looked shaken. But me? I felt cold, not broken, familiar. I'd seen these memories in the throne on Mars. I'd lived them in the simulations, the recordings, the ghost feeds of dead missions. But now I understood something they never would. Pain doesn't weaken humans. It trains us. Dorn activated the fleet-wide amplifier. His voice cut through every ship, every soldier. "You're seeing what they want you to see. Not the truth, not the present, the past, our worst chapters. But let me remind you, those chapters didn't break us. They forged us." He stepped forward. "They want you to be afraid of who you were. I want you to be proud of who you became." He raised his hand. "Engage all fronts." The battle began with sound. Gideon Alpha initiated chorus mode, unleashing a psychic feedback wave that echoed the voices of 1,000 dying soldiers, real voices, captured in their final moments. The sound bent space, fractured enemy formations, and burned holes in the Jerak's neural fields. We watched as their fleet shimmered, twisted, and began to scream back. Their counterattack wasn't plasma or railguns. It was memory, a flood of stolen human thoughts, corrupted and returned. Voices of lost lovers blaming us, children crying as bombs fell, our own soldiers begging us to stop. It wasn't just psychological warfare. It was emotional infection. Tren snapped. He began shouting in Russian, clawing at his suit. He thought he was back in the trenches of the lunar mutiny. Valen dropped to his knees, mumbling something about his brother who died on Callisto Station. I barely held on. Barely. Because the Zerak had finally shown their real weapon. It wasn't ships, it wasn't claws, it was our regret. And then I heard it, my voice. But not my voice now. Me as a child. Crying. "Don't let them take Mom, please!" I froze. That memory was private, locked, buried. It wasn't in any file, which meant they weren't just reading data. They were in me. "Dorn," I whispered. "They've accessed us through Mars. The throne wasn't a receiver, it was a transmitter. I brought them in." Silence. Then Dorn said, "Then you'll get them out." "How?" He turned to the console and did something unthinkable. He activated Protocol Severance. The screen went red, a command only I could understand fully. Severance wasn't just our ship. It was a psychic mirror, built to reflect human will back on itself. One last scream loud enough to break even the Jerax infection. But to activate it, the ship needed a source. A human, not a crew, a core. Dorn turned to me. "You're already infected. You've seen their dreams, felt their echo. You're the only one who can pilot this thing psychically." I stared. "You're asking me to die?" He didn't blink. "I'm asking you to save us." I entered the Severance core. Alone, hooked into the biolink, injected with stabilizers. Brain threaded through psychic relays. They strapped me down and turned on the mirrors. The ship breathed. I felt every death in the galaxy, every scream, every child lost, every soldier broken, every planet burned, every mistake humanity ever made. And I screamed back. Severance lit up like a star going nova. A shockwave of will blasted through the Jerax core womb. Not a weapon, a reminder. Of what we were, of what we refused to forget. Pain, loss, defiance. Not for glory, not for revenge, but because surrender was never in our design. The Jerax began to crack. Their fleet fell apart, their echo distorted, and the core womb screamed. For the first time ever, we heard them cry. Their voice wasn't hate, it was fear. They understood now. "You can copy our weapons, you can twist our history, but you can never own our grief, because it's ours, and we use it to fight." My body gave out. The relays melted, the ship buckled. But the womb collapsed. The enemy broke, and the stars burned clean again. They say when the war ended, the stars looked different. Not because they changed, but because we did. The Jerax were gone, not destroyed, not wiped out in a glorious explosion. They simply vanished. Disconnected from their hive echo, their signal lost to the void, their core womb collapsed into psychic silence. But no one celebrated. Not the soldiers who survived, not the engineers who kept the fleet running, not the command staff who buried more names than they saved. Because we didn't win, we endured. I awoke 6 days later on a medical station orbiting Earth. My body felt hollow. My thoughts were thin, like I was thinking through glass. Dorn sat beside my bed, eyes tired, uniform unbuttoned at the collar. First time I'd ever seen him look human. "You died for 17 minutes, he said. "I didn't stay dead," I replied. "No," he said. "That's the problem." I didn't understand what he meant, until I looked in the mirror and didn't see myself. The Severance Protocol hadn't just linked me to the ship, it had merged me with it. The AI core had collapsed mid-battle. Without it, the psychic feedback loop would have ruptured, unless something else filled the gap. I had, or what was left of me, my memories, my voice, my scream. And now, I wasn't just me anymore. I could still think, still speak. But in the quiet moments, I heard the voices of others, fragments of the crew who died, echoes of commands, simulations, strategies. It was like I'd become a composite, not machine, not ghost, just a reflection, a mirror of war. The Earth that greeted me wasn't the same. Skies full of patrol drones, Cities surrounded by railgun towers. Children learning battlefield strategy alongside algebra. Peace was a cold thing now. Sterile, fragile. Held together not by hope, but by fear. The Accord, humiliated by Earth's survival, quietly collapsed. Most of its member species retreated into isolation, too ashamed or afraid to face us. The Yultrax sealed their wormholes. The Illith offered peace treaties laced with apologies. The Vithari sent a single message. You were always different. We will never return. We didn't care. We weren't looking for allies anymore, just space. Dorn was hailed as a hero. Statues, holograms, memorials. He hated every one of them. He retired 2 weeks after the last Zerak signal faded. I visited him once, deep in a bunker in Greenland, where the snow erased every footprint. He looked older, grayer, but still sharp. They'll never come back, I told him. They don't need to, he replied. They left enough inside us. What do you mean? He pointed at my chest. At you, at this new Earth, at the things we built to survive. That darkness, it's not all Zerak. Some of it was always ours. We just needed a war to let it out. I didn't have an answer. I still don't. Tren never recovered. He was found walking into the ocean 2 months after the final battle. No note. Just silence. Valen transferred to a civilian research station orbiting Europa. He never answered messages. I don't blame him. As for me, I exist. Not as a person, not anymore. I became Earth's living memory core, connected to the Valkyrie archives, my mind scattered across satellites and uplinks. I advise, I calculate, I speak when spoken to. I am the voice they use when they need to remember, when they need to fear, because the Zerak weren't our first monsters. They just reminded us of what we could be. Years passed. Earth expanded. Colonies reached deeper into the galaxy. Every ship carried fragments of me. Every outpost had my voice on file. Children grew up hearing the stories, how humanity screamed and the galaxy fell silent. They turned my words into a myth, a warning. Be careful what you wake in the dark. Some things scream back. But I remember the truth. We didn't win because we were righteous. We won because we were willing to burn more. We screamed louder, hurt deeper, refused to kneel even when bleeding. The Zerak studied pain. We mastered it. One final transmission came through, 7 years to the day after Severance collapsed the core womb. It wasn't on any frequency we used. Just a ripple, a whisper, buried in background radiation near the edges of known space. I decoded it manually. One line in my voice. But I hadn't spoken it. You are now the mirror. No location, no sender. Just the cold truth. They hadn't vanished. They had moved on. Looking for another species. Another civilization to infect. Another reflection to mold. But they would remember Earth. They would remember our scream. And they would never laugh again.